Well, a very good morning to you all and welcome to the AFI Group of Companies webinar on tiers of secondary guarding and how they can potentially save a life. My name is Brian Parker and I'm the Business Development Manager, Technical Support for the group. I'm going to take you through the webinar. Running time is approximately 45 to 50 minutes, all being well, and we'll have a short Q&A section at the end. Hopefully you can all hear me okay. You can see that you've got the opportunity to ask me questions. I've had a few private questions come through, so I will endeavour to look at them as well. So very foggy day today on 29th of September. Hopefully it'll lift and be a lovely day. So just hopefully moving on. Just a little bit about myself, education and more about the industry really. I've been the training committee chairman for IPAF in the past. I'm a current member of the training committee and I sit on various other committees too. One of the ones that I'm quite keen to impart on is the Strategic Forum Plant Safety Group, which is run by predominantly the CPA, Construction Plant Hire Association, and IPAF, right? And very much looking at MUPs as we know them and how they're used in industry today. Okay, so just moving on to a bit of background then. Okay, so there's been 13 deaths, or there was 13 deaths from 2003 to 2009 in the UK involving MUPs that were a crushing injury. And as we knew at the time, we now know that it's normally known as entrapment. Now, clearly sad times and many things were done to try and resolve these issues. You know, we looked at training, we looked at education. But for me, certainly the breakthrough came with the formation of a group of people from the industry, so the MUP industry, the manufacturers, the rental companies, safety professionals, and of course the health and safety executive, and they got together and produced a best practice guidance on avoiding crushing injuries to people in the platform. Now this was issued in 2010 and it will be one of the free downloads that's available at the end of this webinar. I was proud to have worked in the group, which in turn led to the advice being out to people so they can understand a little bit more about, you know, what happens with MUPs. Now, our good friends over at IPAF, which is the International Powered Access Federation, shared some information with us recently. And one of the things that they showed was, and they've been doing a very good study on worldwide data. So you can see this worldwide data, and this is what they know, this is what they've been told, this is what, you know, basically been reported. They've trialed, you know, the MUP newspapers, the internet, etc., to find out incidents that have happened to people whilst using mobile platforms. And you can see there that obviously the biggest protagonist, 2013 being the blue line, 2014 being the red line. Biggest issue there was certainly falls from height. We then had overturning, and then we can see entrapment, so crushing injuries, down to electrocution, impact with the MUP, so vehicles making contact with it, or even MUP to MUP, and falling objects, and a few mechanical and technical issues. So if I go back to this entrapment, you can see there from, and this, not forgetting of course, this is worldwide data. You know, there has been less incidents from crushing. We're raising awareness, and people have been, you know, certainly more aware. You know, training courses are changing, so lots of things that have been done by the industry. But collectively, when we look at that, the UK statistics show that we had one fatal incident where a worker died as a result of entrapment, and that was in the 2013 to 2014 in the UK. But worldwide, we can show collectively over that period of 2 years, we've had 27 people lose their lives as a result of entrapment. So it would kind of seem that, you know, the UK has improved in this area. You know, why is this so? You know, of course we've got the guidance, you know, we've got training. I think we've got more awareness in the industry now, and certainly people are a little bit more, you know, certainly the IPAF courses, the MUPs and managers courses that are delivered, a lot more emphasis now on crushing risks and entrapment, you know, and where unfortunately these things can happen. But of course we have a number of secondary guarding devices, and we'll get onto that a little bit later. Drumming down into the data, and you can see here that on entrapment, okay, the biggest issue was on 3B or mobile type booms, so it's probably no surprise to you. The next one is 3A, sort of mobile vertical, or what we know as commonly as a scissor lift. And we had a issue on a couple of issues on a 1B, so a static boom. And there's one there to be confirmed, so I'm not sure what that was. But again, if we look to the left, still the biggest issue, falls from height, predominantly from boom type platforms and which are mobile, and static booms, and a number of overturnings. So, albeit we have big issues with entrapment, and we understand that, there is certainly other bigger issues in terms of falls from height and overturns. But every one of them is obviously a catastrophic day and a changing of lives. Okay, so just a little bit about regulations that basically that we have to adhere to here in the UK. Pure and Lola. Pure requires that the work equipment provided is of what's called suitable for use. Now, employers have a duty to identify potential groups at risk, so groups of people. We have a lot of very experienced people in this industry that use MUPEs day in, day out. And equally, we have a lot of people who are very much experienced in their trades that use MUPEs on an ad hoc basis. So they might use the machine once a week, once a month. Who's more at risk? These are questions that you may want to ask later on, but you can, in one sense, you can say the guy that's using the machine every day in, day out, a steel erector, for example, is going to be more competent, but he can also be clearly more complacent because, it's never going to happen to me. Even recently, we've had an incident with a steel erector on a boom type platform that had a secondary guarding device fitted. So there's no golden ticket that's going to get you out of this. You need to be more aware. But we know that the employer must carry out their risk assessments, and we need to ensure that any risk created by the use of any equipment, so that's the MUPE, okay, the location where we are protected by a combination of guarding, protection devices, warning devices, and of course, safe systems of work, training and risk assessments. So in terms of looking at the protection devices, all MUPEs are fitted what we call primary guarding. Now, the primary guarding to me and to you, if you've used a MUPE, is going to be a foot switch. It's going to be an interlock device. It's going to be some type of enable device, a collar on a control. So I've got to engage that before I operate a function. So we come into secondary guarding devices, which is where these are then going to protect us from things that are potentially sometimes not in our control. If any particular risk assessment identifies higher risk of potential entrapment, so for example, close work to overhead obstructions, then the use of secondary guarding should probably be considered as part of a risk reduction strategy, together with other recommendations, spotters, trained people, rescuers, etc. Now, in the Strategic Forum for Construction Plant Safety Group guidance on avoiding trapping and crushing injuries to people in the platform, it refers to planning the route, looking at the specific machine, ensuring that they're trained and familiarized with that piece of equipment, ensuring that we have people who are trained in the rescue of people from down, from up at height. Rescue is very, very big to me. I've been to crushing injuries before. I've been involved with fatalities. Rescue training, we need to make it routine. We have a fire drill, periodically. Let's make rescue training. Let's make people being able to get down a routine occurrence, instead of when it happens, unfortunately I thought I was pressing the right button and I wasn't. So if we look at Pure, it says that every employer shall ensure that no employee is carried by mobile work equipment unless it incorporates features for reducing to as low as reasonably practicable risk to their safety, including risks from wheels and tracks. And Lola also states that we must prevent a person using it being crushed, trapped, struck, or falling from the carrier. So we've already seen a number of falls, but it specifically says under Regulation 5 there, must prevent a person from being crushed or trapped. So certainly food for thought there. Okay, the management regulations. Regulation 4 talks about principles of prevention to be applied. And it states there that these regulations imply that any protective measures for the principles set out in Schedule 1. So Schedule 1 is like a hierarchy, and really this should be adhered to. All right, so I'm not going to go through all that. You're quite capable of looking at. These are self-explanatory. Avoiding risks. the minute that we go up in the platform, we're at risk already. So, how are we going to ensure that we, retain them in that platform? Evaluating the risks that cannot be avoided, combating the risks at source. All right, but for me, we've got to look a little bit further down here. All right, so we need to look at the choice of the equipment, in particular looking at the adapting to technical progress, replacing the dangerous with the non-dangerous. Okay, so fairly self-explanatory. Ever any doubt of how we should be managing our risk procedures, we need to look at Schedule 1 of the Management of Health and Safety at Work regulations. Okay, just to make you fully aware, and I'm sure you are, the HSE inspectors will consider enforcement action where they believe there is a risk of entrapment which is not being managed effectively. And this came out back in 2010, so it's quite a few moons ago now. It was a FOD, Field Operation Directive, and the HSE, so you're just well aware, actively impart on various working groups. One of the ways that this is one of the ways that they can reach out to industry. So in 2010, for example, this led to the HSE releasing this FOD. Message is quite simple: manage your MUPs effectively and identify entrapment issues and do something about it. Now, this alert itself advises that covers and shrouds on machines and their controls do not protect against entrapment of operators. So we've got shrouds and covers on machine. It's going to do nothing to protect the actual operator. So duty holders are directed to two sources of industry guidance which may be used in assessing and reducing the risk of entrapment and crushing accidents. Duty holders should also assess the potential for entrapment and crushing accidents in MUPs for the specific tasks which they're going to undertake. So where a secondary guarding device has been specified and required, it should be selected for the specific application. Its limitations should be clearly understood by those who are going to use the machine, and of course, rescuers. So remember, covers and shrouds on machine controls should not be relied upon to reduce the risk of entrapment and crushing. In fact, we've actually seen people unfortunately fatally killed from actually using machines in close proximity to overhead obstructions and be actually killed by the shroud. So previous webinar, if those of you that listened, I did this on the Health and Safety Executives Guidance Document GEIS6, and that has really updated what you're looking at now. And they do specifically talk about secondary guarding devices available. So you must be aware of that. And of course, read any guidance in conjunction with the IPAF guidance and the Strategic Foreign Plant Safety Group, avoiding crushing and trapping injuries to people in the platform. So hierarchies, if we kind of go look a bit further on it and then look at a hierarchy of control, we're always going to have a look at elimination being the first one, and that's what we would call a tier 1. Tier 2 would be substituting it. Tier 3 would be engineering controls. Tier 4 would be administrating controls, behavior, training, etc. And Tier 5 would be putting the hard hat and the PPE on the person. So hierarchy of hazard control is a system used in industry to minimize or eliminate exposure to hazards. It is a widely accepted system promoted by numerous safety organizations and safety professionals. So risks should always be reduced to the lowest reasonably practical level by taking these preventative measures in order of this priority. Okay, it would be very easy just to jump to BPA, but you've got to remember we've got tier 1, 2, 3 and 4 first. Okay, so this will set out the ideal order when planning to reduce the risk from the risk of entrapment. So consider the headings in order. Remember, don't just jump to the easiest control measure to implement. So tier 1 and tier 3, I will discuss these a little bit later on. I mentioned some guidance, and this guidance for Strategic Foreign Plant Safety Group is the document on the left there, okay, freely downloadable from many websites. It's very much a practical, helpful and easy reading piece of guidance. Part 1 is for supervisors and managers and those who are looking after and particularly selecting people for working up in the air, whereas Part 2 is more tuned to looking at rescuers and operators, those who are working in the platform. IPAF themselves have produced a number of other documents which you'll find on their webpage under the resources and the technical guidance notes. I would encourage you to review these. An example there of one of the guidance documents that they put together, because we have to let people know what these are about. So these again will be available at the end of the presentation. Okay, I'm just going to bring to your attention an incident which happened over in the Boggabri coal mine in New South Wales in Australia recently, and this happened in 2014, and it was a partly constructed steel building, and the report was issued in 2015, and I think this is testament to the work of the Mine Safety Investigation Unit. They've investigated or partially investigated this so quickly. We see too often in the UK where it takes 4 or 5 years before we get any sort of tangible findings from incidents. Unfortunately, by that time we've put a lot of people up in the air and used a lot of equipment, and unfortunately it could happen again. So this picture here that you're looking at the moment shows the aftermath of the incident, and you can see the platform around about 14 meters up in the air, and as it says there, investigations are still going ahead. Here we've got the basket after it had been released, and you can see these two beams here, okay, which is unfortunately where our deceased worker was fatally injured, and you can see there. So basically the operator was tightening bolts up inside the steel structure. A mobile compressor was at the base running air lines up to the landing platform just below the MEWP. Flexible hoses were then being conveyed up to the actual platform, and he was using a heavy pneumatic impact wrench. The contractor themselves had instigated procedures, and they'd insisted that a spotter was put in place to control the identified risk of being crushed between the MEWP and the overhead structure. Now, at the time of the incident, the deceased was last seen standing in the MEWP basket with a small distance between the deceased's head and the beam. Shortly afterwards, unfortunately, the deceased was seen with their head caught between the steel beam and the safety rail at the front of the platform. All right, so this is this bit here. Forgive my drawing there, and their head was caught in there. Now, it is appropriate to state that I'll just clear them. Show that. It was appropriate to show you the position of the worker at the time. So even there, you can probably see that he's looking around. He's probably looked to see where the jib is, reached forward, and unfortunately, he's either made control error, operator error, not taking into account, certain direction of the machine, whatever. I would imagine that we'll find the full findings of this incident in due course. This investigation is still ongoing, and what has been written in this investigation report is interesting. I think if you read it, it's like some great bits of information there, but I think and for me, it's sad to see that they refer to published best practice guidance to the latter part of the document, and they also then require the mine operator to consider engineering controls which provide overhead protection for operators. So albeit though they've mentioned, well done for doing it, I've actually realised at the end of it, well, there is actually guidance and documents and secondary guarding devices out there that could potentially have prevented this incident. So let's go on to secondary guarding devices then. Okay, so there are two main types of secondary guarding devices which are available for boom type MEWPs. Okay, we have physical and we have pressure sensing devices. Okay, physical, we have full protection for either the operator or the whole platform, and that's what we call a mechanical device. Okay, whereas the other type is pressure sensing devices. Now there are two types here. There's electronic interface and electronic. Okay, so them two devices, quite simple, quite straightforward. So mechanical secondary guarding devices. All right, so if we remember earlier what we talked about earlier, tier 1 being elimination, this is what would be considered as elimination. Steel structure that prevents the operator from being crushed. Simple, strong, extremely reliable, they can be reused, and these devices generally project above the machine platform to protect the operator from crushing, which can obviously still lead to serious injuries, fatal injuries. Okay, most of these, with the exception of Sanctuary Zone, have been designed by mute manufacturers themselves. So I've said, we've got 2 manufacturers there that have seen the benefit in designing a tier 1 device. Okay, and again, if we look at the hierarchy of control, these prevent the crushing. The advantage, like I said earlier, they are strong. There's no electrical interaction with the machine. Okay, and the only thing that we could probably say there is that you're going to add a little bit of weight to the platform, okay, but what's that when we're taking into account something which protects him? So you can see a steel beam there, right? You see the operator working. You can just imagine now the similar incident that I've just shown you in the mine, okay, and the guy's leaning forward, looking where he's going, and unfortunately makes contact. Okay, the Genie OPS, or operator protection structure, simply there you can see there that's for the operator only, so he stands inside his own sort of enclosed area there. And the Skyjack SGM, Skyguard Mechanical, you can see the similar sort of thing. The picture only shows it from sideways there, but if you take the same principle, it's exactly it's very similar to that, all right, just in a different design. Okay. So tier 3 now. So we talked earlier about this is engineering control. These are interactive types of device which will react to a crushing scenario. So the operator themselves is pushed onto a bar which either stops the function, or auto reverses the last operation. Sometimes we have a fixed bar, sometimes we have a movable bar. These will not always preserve the physical integrity of the operator. Right, depending on where we're going, we still have to be forced onto this bar for the thing to work, so we're going to sustain some injuries. These will detect crushing only, and in these scenarios with these machines, they will either raise an alarm, sound alarm, or have a flashing light. Flashing lights do vary. Sometimes the flashing light is underneath the platform, sometimes it's at the base. Now, electronic interactive secondary guarding will in some cases permit mute movements once it's been activated, but we have to be aware that some of these movements are automatic. So I'm reversing back, I strike the bar, and it automatically drives forward. But sometimes they will only do the inverse operation, so the reverse. So if I'm lifting up, it will only allow me to lower down. Okay, so we can see the JLG Skyguard there. Activated by approximately 23 kilograms or 3.6 stone of force, and this will stop all function use at the time. After stopping the machine, the control system automatically assesses the functions in use by the operator at the time of the activation, and for a short period of time is able to reverse that sequence. Active Shield by Hulot. This alerts the operator to potential crushing and features a safety gap that can protect the operator from entrapment over the controls and potentially allow them to get out of danger. Now, following the alert, only reverse or lowering movements are permitted. So that's what we talk about in burst movements, allowing a possibly panicked operator to get out of trouble without making the situation worse. After it's been triggered, the system is then able to reset and reactivated from the platform. Snorkel Guard, this is the latest device that's been out, and Snorkel actually contacted me when they heard I was doing this webinar. They very, very keen to obviously promote this. Designed by in-house Snorkel engineering team. It's simple, it's a mechanical system that features a spring-loaded rail that sits above the upper control panel, which cuts out machine operations when compressed. So basically an operator being pushed against the controls. The operator can override Snorkel Guard using a switch in the platform, and in the event that it's activated in error, so I've lent on it, I can just reset it. Now it's my belief that Snorkel are one of the only manufacturers to introduce this type of mechanical system as a standard feature on their new equipment. All right, so tier 3, or known as now as electronic secondary guarding. So we've had electronic interactive, now I've got electronic secondary guarding. This works by the operator being forced onto a bar or a sensor bar, which in turn stops the mute. Now the MUPE in some cases unable to reverse the last operation, mean rescue from the ground is the only option. So many of these secondary guarding electronic devices, as I said there, work by a sensor bar being pushed and of course pressurized. Now, what's going to push and pressurize it is often going to be the torso of a person or some bodily part which causes the force. The sensor bar, once activated, then stops the machine and in most cases sounds an alarm and activates a flashing light. Different manufacturing devices work in different ways. And of course, you know, this being probably the most sensitive of most of the devices, can lead to false alarms with some machines. So, you know, basically I've turned around, you know, I've not isolated the machine, I've rested on the actual control, and as you can see from some of them, they are very easy to trip. Okay, so the SGE system features a sensor bar that when pushed instantly stops all machine functions, initiates a siren and a high intensity flashing beacon. If the bar is released within a second, the siren and beacon will cease and the selected function can then return. But if I apply it for more than a second, they will continue to operate and the engine will stop, halt all functions until the machine is reset. So completely different to what you've just seen on the interactive devices. The Genie OPA, okay, or Sky Siren, this system was designed to be as unobtrusive as possible and features a pressure-sensitive horizontal bar that is fitted at waist height below the control panel. When pressure is placed on the bar, the system is activated. As you can see, there's a reset button that can be pressed if the system is, you know, inadvertently activated or touched in error. Now, this system can be retrofitted to any Genie articulating or telescopic boom lift manufactured after 2002. So if you've got any platforms that are older than that, unfortunately this cannot be can be fitted to it. Sky Alarm, designed by another rental company, and you can see that here, there. All right, so a bit like a black strip there going along it. Okay, and you can see that protrudes even further than the last one. Okay, so and Manitou's Mansafe system. Okay, so again, similar sort of black strip there at the very bottom. Okay, so you can see there's 4 different types there. We've got 3 different types of electronic interactive, and we've got 3 different types of mechanical. So we've got the tier 1s and the tier 3s. Okay, moving on now, we've also got another type, which is the electronic control panel detection type. And Nifty Lift themselves brought out Psyops, Sustained Involuntary Operator Protection System, took it to a different level, and the whole panel itself will move down. So if I'm forced onto that panel by striking something behind me, that's going to force down and prevent me from hopefully being crushed. So some of the secondary guarding devices and equipment that I've just shown you there are fitted to the mutes by the manufacturer during their MUPE assembly process. Some of them are standard now, you can buy them. And as such, these are an integral part of the original machine design and certification. I have found principal contractors wrongly assuming that they can fit a SkyGuard to a Genie or a Sky, an active shield to a Skyjack. It's not, you can't do that. They can be fitted to manufacturer machine specific only. The only device which has multiple manufacturer approval is Sanctuary Zone. Only device, okay? So just be aware of that. You might favor one, and I'm not here to promote anything. I'm to tell you what these devices are and what is available. They might well favor one, but you go and hire a machine from a rental company and you might not necessarily get the same device again. So there's issues with familiarization, rescue potentially, them sort of things. So guidance is available in terms of if we actually fit an additional device to an existing machine. So it is recommended that those intended to fit or use a device refer to the Strategic Forum Plant Safety Group on Part 1, Section 6, fitting additional devices or equipment to MUPEs. And it talks about risk assessments and the legal requirements, the machinery directive, provision and use of work equipment regulations. We've got to have signage and decals to tell us what's what, etc. So not going to go too much into that, you'll be pleased to hear. But once we've fitted this to this machine, okay, you're taking responsibility. So certainly as hirers, I wouldn't suggest any of you start fitting these things to other machines unless you've had specific machine approval. And obviously, ensure you've got it from the rental company. So uses of secondary guarding. Okay, so let's not forget what we talked earlier about. We have the Health and Safety's Field Operations Directive. Basically they can, if they see a potentially crushing scenario which is not being effectively managed, they can obviously look at prosecution, and clearly that might be, for example, fee for intervention or something like that, or even prosecution itself. So some examples of where we would potentially need secondary guarding. The list potentially could be endless, but clearly when it's client policy or part of somebody's group practices. For example, UKCG has just become Build UK. UKCG, very good at putting together documents, okay, and they put together the MUPE toolkit. So we've got examples of what they would expect their supply chain to adhere to should they be bringing mobile platforms onto their sites. So all mobile boom types operating on UKCG sites should normally be fitted with some type of secondary guarding device, and the contractor will select the most appropriate device or system for the risks associated with the tasks. All right, they're going to obviously support that with some type of suitable risk assessment. Now, if a secondary guarding device is not fitted, basically a suitable risk assessment must be approved by the MUPE manager. All right, effectively, this is a reverse risk assessment. So they've got to prove that there's no risk of crushing for them to say we don't need a secondary guarding device. And obviously all them sort of things are recorded, for future. All right, so where we're going to need them: steel work, when we're doing ducting, leading edge, pipe works, tunnels, roofing, scenarios, painting operation. You might think, well, I won't need painting. Depends how close we're going into scenarios where we need to paint. But the list can be literally endless. Okay, it only takes half a second to operate control and potentially go into a very, very serious scenario. So if we look at the Boggabri coal mine incident that I mentioned earlier, they came up with some recommendations and potential hazardous situations, but certainly things that we need to look at here. So for example, when we're looking at overhead obstructions in the path of the MUPE, potentially, not looking where we're going, spatial awareness, we don't understand, dynamics of the machine, etc. So if we take into account, looking down, operator error, operating the wrong control, not being able to judge distance, situational awareness, as you can see in that picture there, other platforms working, cranes, fork trucks, etc. What if I've got beams or, steel work or ducting, etc. I've got cables, I've got various things in the platform, and, even situations here where, the operator on the left or on the right has to lower down to a safer height to clear obstructions, but often they'll just travel elevated and hopefully they'll get away with it. What about disorientation? So operating the machine 360 degrees to the actual chassis, or sorry, 180 degrees to the chassis. So I'm the wrong way around. So normally 90 degrees slewed in the opposite direction. I operate forward and the machine travels in reverse. Objects in the ground in the area the MUPE needs to move. So I have to drive over something or clear something. It could be a curb, a 4-inch curb. It could be a block. It could be a piece of timber. Lighting inadequate, obstructions, overhead whilst working in that area. One thing I'll mention there as well is ramping up and down. Okay, so what if I forget that machine's got a ramping time? So ramping up and down and not getting into the right area, slowing down, and it moves actually faster than I realised. The picture on the right there, at the bottom right there, was one of our sanctuary zone, which actually was involved in an incident in a shipyard. And basically, you can see there that the basket's taken quite a impact, but okay, the operator survived. 24,000 tons of boat 16,000 kilograms of boom, okay, and 120 kilograms of operator. Who's going to come off worse? All right, well, this, the guy, the safety manager from there, said to us, I don't care what damage we do to your platform as long as my operator walks home, and he's more than prepared to pay for the damage there. In this scenario, it wasn't the operator's fault. It was the boat that moved, okay, and it made contact with the actual corner of the platform, as you can see there, bending the platform guardrails in. Very lucky man. So previously noted, there is no we've got quite a few secondary devices that are out there, all right, but the HSE and the Strategic Foreign Plant Safety Group have actually stated there is currently no one particularly secondary guarding device that will prevent entrapment in all known circumstances. So there's no golden egg here. You haven't got one device that's going to stop you in any known potential incident. So therefore, the following 5 points should be considered as part of a risk assessment process, to assist employers in selecting the most appropriate secondary guarding device. So why, reasons for selecting the MUPE and for the intended work. Foreseeable entrapment situations. Different types of secondary guarding devices available. Their suitability and their compatibility with the selected platform. Additional hazards, all right, compared against the potential benefits that may be gained from introducing a secondary guarding device. And of course, the need for familiarization of operators and rescue personnel. Remember, let's try and make this rescue, commonplace. How many times do you walk past a MUPE up in the air and there's maybe somebody stood nearby? Just say to the guy, can you show me you can get that machine down? And if he's standing there scratching his head thinking, where do I start? You've got a problem. Right, because if you read the guidance that I mentioned earlier, it's going to give you a good insight into the time that you need to react to get somebody down safely. Now, some contractors have actually considered fitting multiple devices. So, in other words, two secondary guarding devices, so a mechanical and an electronic interactive or an electronic. Would you consider it? Would that be something that you might think would be potentially beneficial to your organization? So, dangers when driving or positioning a MUPE. So we've considered some of the scenarios earlier, we've considered some of the issues. Let's have a look at some thoughts here now. So I'm going to show you a few videos in a minute, but I'm also going to show you that bottom picture there. And this is the decal that was designed by IPAF to identify the location of the emergency lowering control. So you will see that on quite a number of MUPEs. So depicting there somebody that's getting down, needs to be brought down from height. Recently, I put together a HSEQ bulletin, and I wrote the article on the new EN 280 standard. Anybody who's ever been involved in rescuing a workmate or a colleague from a stranded platform or involved in a serious incident will know that practicing the emergency lowering controls is essential to ensure that this will be understood. But to add to this, now some manufacturers now stated that their emergency lowering systems do not need to be function tested prior to the use of this, and they will self-check. So not forgetting, of course, if we've got secondary guarding devices fitted to this, and this is why I'm getting onto this, we need to ensure that we understand how that secondary guarding device will impact on the use of that MUPE. And it's very important that. So just show you a little brief film here. So operators working away, as ever, they often get very much fixated on the controls, and unfortunately he's pushed onto the controls there and he's unable to release himself. Okay, so the rescue scenario, if it's got electronic secondary guarding devices fitted, how is that going to impact? Is it going to override the ground controls? Is there other ways I can get the machine down? There are things that you need to consider, and clearly making sure that you understand the manufacturer's instruction manual. Let's turn the sound off there. Not my kind of music. So he's driving into a building. Now forgive the the name on the boom there. All right, but this is just for dynamics. This is why I'm showing you this, yeah? So same scenario, this time so fixated in the controls and clunk, make control with the, make contact with the secondary guarding device. You can see the beam here now, here. And you can see the gap there that the person has actually got. But we always think that the issue is going to be from above. Okay, and what we sometimes don't always consider or factor in, that it might not necessarily always be from above. So the impact may come from different areas. Okay. So a boom traveling at its elevated speed of 0.61 miles per hour will travel 10.73 inches in 1 second. But the same boom folded down and in the transport position will travel 52.8 inches in 1 second. So colossal difference there. Okay. Kind of an indication there of the ship incident that I mentioned earlier. So, but in this size, unfortunately, or fortunately, he stopped. You can see now he's gone up and over a mound or a curb or something like that. Okay, so an 85-foot boom elevated at around 45-degree angle at full outreach will drive, which then drives over a 4-inch obstacle, will raise around about 40 inches in 1.23 seconds. So the scenario here is having no secondary guarding. And you can see the potential there. And I mentioned earlier that we always consider normally, being forced over the controls. But unfortunately, people often forget there are other ways that we can be impacted. And for me, this is one of the most harrowing ones here. We think of fact is that we are now going down something like a 4 or 5 inch, and the effect and the actual rate of climb on that platform will be phenomenal to the operator. So what industry did then was in 2012, Skanska themselves introduced mandatory secondary guarding on Type 3B machines across their supply chain. So they were one of the first people to mandate secondary guarding on MUPEs, and most of this has effectively affected their supply chain. And we then found that other main contractors soon followed suit. Some machines then, some main contractors then follow the advice of the UKCG, or what we know as Build UK's MUPE toolkit. As we've seen, number of devices have now become available, and it's also my understanding that there are devices now being developed for vertical type MUPEs too. So secondary guarding, mandatory on most main contractor projects. The device must be manufacturer approved. So remember, we've got to take into account the MUPE Safety Forum guidance, and we must rescue, practice our rescue, rehearse, and ensure that our emergency procedures are critical to understanding how that secondary guarding device impacts on the use of the MUPE. I mentioned earlier the Build UK or UKCG Toolkit, and what they basically said there now, the Build UK, incidentally, has been created as a result of a merger between the National Specialist Contractors Council and the UK Contractors Group, and this was actually formed in September 2015. Now they produced this this document, which is effectively a signposting document to lead you to various aspects of policy and procedures. And what it states there is, if a secondary guarding device system is not fitted, a suitable risk assessment must be approved by the UKCG MUPE manager, which shows that the risks associated with entrapment have been appropriately controlled by means other than a secondary guarding device, or the risk of entrapment is minimal. So you basically saying there, you've got to have a very good reason why you're not going to have one. All right, not sure if you're aware, but certainly in the MUP industry, the HSE, or the Health and Safety Laboratories, HLHSL, are currently reviewing all secondary guarding devices that are available on the market. And basically, they are going to identify which devices do actually work and do what they say or what they were meant to. They're also going to look at ergonomics of the actual devices and the design of the device. Speaking to the HSE, they're going to look at how operators can interact with the machine, and some that have led to a false sense of security from having the devices fitted. I know from having reversing sensors fitted to my car. I basically go until it reverse sometimes until I hear the loud beep. Is that going to be an issue? And of course, what industry must do to ensure operators are fully protected. So I think it's very interesting times. Typically with the health and safety executive, God bless them, I can't see anything being, out for the foreseeable future. But let's see what they actually recommend and what their guidance says. All right, just to summarise then, we've looked at the background of secondary guarding and the law, and of course what guidance is out there. The secondary guarding devices are available from the manufacturers, from rental companies, and the tiers of secondary guarding. Covered CE marking and fitting of secondary guarding devices, and some uses and potential possible hazardous situations. Looking at advice and what industry has done, and of course the Build UK MUP toolkit. I certainly think from the HSE and the health and safety laboratories, once they get this guidance or this study done, I think there'll be some interesting things that actually come out, and whether or not it's positive for everybody or not, I don't know. Question and answers. I'm not sure. Hopefully, you've been able to ask questions. I have received questions afterwards, which is fine, and I will endeavour to answer any questions that people maybe don't want to ask on here. Incidentally, they're all private. They're not sent up on the screen. But I have had a couple of questions. Oh yeah, I've got a question here. SkyGuard device. What pressure will I've heard it will break off. At what pressure will that break off for? Okay, right, great question. The JLG SkyGuard, you see earlier it said that it'll be activated with 23 kilograms of force. Basically what will happen is when the device registers 28 kilograms of force, the actual secondary guarding strip that you saw on the front of the actual SkyGuard will break off. So that's effectively giving you more space then to operate the controls and hopefully get you out. Don't forget, 28 kilograms of force is still like having a four stone child jump on your chest or your back. So you are potentially going to get some injuries. I've got a question here from Adam. What is hydraulic ramping? Right, hydraulic ramping, quite simply, this is speeding up and slowing down of the machine. Now this is either a mechanical or an electric interaction of the machine. So I'm driving along, I let go of the controls. Okay, it's not going to stop immediately. If it stopped immediately, it'd throw me out the platform. So this is going to slow down gradually. And the same can be for when I'm lifting up or lowering down. So if I'm lifting up, it says audio connection has been lost. Hopefully you can still hear me. So if I'm lifting up now, it will slow down once I let go of the control. Got a question here. Oh, good question. So hi Brian, what about scissor lifts? Okay, scissor lifts. It is my understanding that there are a number of rental companies and manufacturers now looking at a device or devices for mobile verticals or scissor lifts. I'm sure there's going to be a number of devices that are out there So in the next year or two. I'm not sure how far down the line they are going at the moment, but I know ourselves, we've been looking at vertical type machines of some type of device. If you think about scissor lifts, we're going in a lot more closer sometimes into the gods of the building, and we're going straight up and straight down, whereas a boom is moving all over. Any more questions? So scissor lifts is something that is in progress, and I have heard rumblings that there's possibly some devices in manufacture right now. Okay, I don't think I've got any more questions. I'd just like to thank you all for attending this webinar. You will get your opportunity there to complete a short survey and send us some feedback, and you can join us on social media at the Twitters, Facebook and LinkedIn pages. Hopefully you've enjoyed it, and hopefully it's been informative to you. Appreciate it. If you've got any questions and you wish to email me privately afterwards, I'm more than happy to help. Thank you very much. Have a great day.